All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Form Check Friday, where we take your videos, I critique them, and we try to help you all become better powerlifters. If you're interested in submitting to Form Check Friday, we have a new process for that, so check the link in the description below. We have a form on our website where you can submit your videos to get them looked at. Now, let's get to it. So we've got Noah here. Now, to tell you a little bit about Noah, he's 17. He's planning to compete in October in powerlifting, obviously. His 1RM squat is 395, and he feels like his knee cave is an issue. So when I was watching this back, the first thing I noticed is, okay, yeah, there's some knee cave. Do I think that the knee cave is the thing I would focus on if I was your coach? No, I don't think so. I think what I would zone in on and hone in on, rather, maybe a better way of putting it, would be the bracing. And I think the big thing is that we're losing a lot of bracing. This torso angle changes quite a bit. If we look at the angle of your ascent, the concentric, the upward phase of the movement, versus the angle on the descent, is very different. So we're coming down with a lot of pressure on the toes. We're going up with a lot of pressure on the heels. And I don't think either of those is necessarily right, but what I would have you do is try to normalize that so that we have even pressure heel to toe throughout the lift on both the downward and upward phase. Generally speaking, a really, really good squatter, you're going to be able to play it on the way down and on the way up, and you're not going to be able to tell if you take a freeze frame of it. So the big things I would recommend to you to help work on this bracing, I think that the hand position where you've got your grip set here is kind of limiting. And I think the reason a lot of people do this is because it makes you feel like you're tight. By putting your hands really, really close, makes you feel like you're tight. And I think in a lot of cases, if you're not actively creating that tension and thinking about pulling your shoulder blades back and maintaining some very intentional upper back contraction, that we kind of rely on that feeling of tightness, but we end up losing it as soon as we hit the bottom. And we can see that here. You know, the shoulders are a little bit rolled forward even to start with. Now watch what happens as soon as you come up, right? The hips shoot up behind you, the knees come in, and the knees go back. So maybe working on that upper back position would help you not get pitched forward by the bar. So very intentionally pulling that bar into your back, trying to find tension and tightness through your lats. And I think widening the grip a little bit on your squat would help. Now, the other thing that I think would help is just thinking about maintaining your brace into and out of the bottom, right? If you can think about keeping some contraction and not allowing the movements to be like the descent and then a gap in tightness and then the ascent. It's like we want to kind of load the spring, maintain, and kind of even build tension as we descend, and then use that tension to come back up. The last thing I'm going to mention here is this idea of the sort of ribs down bracing. I think as we come up, when we lose tension, we default into a bit of a more extended position. And in some cases, for some lifters, this can create that kind of sticking point, that inability to keep the knees forward and in position. And there's that sticking point I'm talking about. And it also kind of manifests here, and you can see this change in where you're looking in your head position, right? Look at where you're looking on the way down. I think you're looking into a mirror, which again, I'll always recommend don't look into mirrors, especially in this rack, man. You can put the bar on this side, put the J-hook cups or the hooks or whatever on this side, and look out this way. That way you're gonna be looking down at the floor, maybe a little distance out ahead of you. And I think that's gonna be better for a lot of reasons. That way you can keep your gaze fixed. You're not changing it throughout, which again is going hand in hand with that loss of bracing. So hopefully you can utilize some of those tips, and I really do hope that helps for you, Noah. Up next is Murad. Now Murad's doing some bench press here. He's watching all the way from Jordan, so shout outs to Murad. Thanks for submitting. He says he's 5'7", 170 pounds, training on and off with quarantines since about 2019. Now there's definitely some things I noticed right away with Murad's bench. The first thing I notice here is that the grip is pretty narrow again, and you'll see me mention this a lot on our channel. Wider grip on the bench in a lot of cases can help minimize the range of motion, minimize the demand on the shoulders, and just allow us to maintain in a better position into the bottom. Now that's not a rule. There are exceptions to that concept that the wider grip is better, and you might be one of those. All I'm saying is play around with that, experiment with that, see if a wider grip is more comfortable. But on a bigger note, there are some technical changes that you can make with your bench, even if you're going to keep the narrow grip. So number one, we're really dropping the bar on the chest as we get into the bottom. We've got this like nice controlled, almost overly slow eccentric or descent to about here. Then from about here, you literally just kind of lose all tension and drop the bar into your chest and try to bounce it off. Now, when we do that, in a lot of cases, we can get a decent bit of acceleration from that kind of bounce, that really quick stretch shortening cycle. But the problem manifests as such. Watch this. Boom. Bounces. We lose a lot of shoulder and elbow position. The bar starts going out this way. And that's kind of the opposite of the way that we want to be pressing when we're talking about the bench press. Generally speaking, we want that bar to come back and up. That line that I traced there is kind of the ideal bar path if you want to watch a bench straight on from the side. If it touches the chest, we want it to come back over the shoulders slightly and then straight up. What happens when the bar goes out here is we create a real leverage disadvantage for the shoulders, right? That weight is now moving further away from the joint producing the force, which is the shoulder, right? Your pecs, that's what we're pressing with. When we lose the bar out this way, you can see it slows down a lot until you're able to kind of wiggle the bar back into a better position over the shoulders. So all that is to say, more control on the descent. If anything, go quicker through the first part of the range of motion and then slow down and be more controlled towards the bottom. That way you can control how the bar impacts you. You control how you are overcoming that inertia to change directions. You can implement some pauses, which is something I always recommend, especially if you have any interest in powerlifting in the future. That can go a long ways to building some isometric strength and allowing you to be ready for those press commands in competition. And the last thing I'm going to mention is this leg drive, foot position, lower body position. It looks like we're getting a fair bit of arch. I think on some of these reps, the butt might be coming up. And unfortunately, with these benches, you're kind of limited if you're not a super tall guy, and I don't mean that as an insult, but you should be able to get a decent position with your feet where you can get like knee below hip. So this is good in that sense, but I would try to get your feet flat on the ground so you're gonna have a little more stability. Again, depending on what federation you choose to compete in, that might even be required of you when it comes to the bench. So whole bunch to think about. If you want to, you can scroll back and scrub back and listen to that blurb over again, but we're gonna move on to the next one. Now the next one is Nick doing some deadlifts here. Now, Nick has been powerlifting for about 1 year. This is between 70 and 80%, and this is his second set of the day. So the set starts really good. I just want to kind of highlight this first rep, and maybe we try to use this first rep kind of as an example for the rest of the set. So let's look at where your position is. If I can draw a straight line, there we go. We'll look at where your hip height is, and let's go from there. So we pull our first rep, pretty damn good. Second rep, let's look at the position we pull this from. Right? So we're much further forward, which means we're out over the bar more. We get this nice sort of back angle, but I think what happens is we start really prioritizing back tension and back position, and we start to forget to create tension and drive in the legs throughout the set. So we end up with this increasingly more forward start position. We end up losing more position in terms of the hips rising as we start the lift. And we do start to like round out a little bit more in the back, which again, not the end of the world, not a really big deal at all. But I think that number one, you'd benefit a lot from watching the video that we put out the other day on how to find your ideal hip height in the deadlift. I think that's a perfect guide to illustrate what I'm about to talk about here. So if you're interested, check that out. I'll get Dylan to put that in the description box below as well. But what we're trying to do here is, and you do it well in this first rep, you kind of load yourself down. You're like loading a spring, right? We're finding quad tension, we're finding hip and hamstring tension, and we're finding this back tension. Great rep, like I said. Rep 2, we kind of just sit down. We're not back, right? And I think that's the biggest thing here is we end up forward instead of actually, leveraging ourselves against the bar, kind of pulling ourselves into position, When your hips are high like this, I want you to try to find this tension through here, hips and hamstring. A lot of times that's going to be a little further back on your heels. Once you find that, maintain that tension, pull yourself down into position until you find the quad tension, and you can simultaneously or shortly after you find that quad tension, flatten the back out, pull the back into position. And I think you'll find, if we look at So shoulder blade, pretty much right over the bar, right? There we go. In the next rep, again, like shoulder blade a little bit further forward. In the next rep, I think we're a little bit further forward still, right? And you can see this kind of movement of the lower body where the knees straighten, the hips come up and back behind you, and now you're in this kind of like stiff-legged position. So we're gonna try to avoid that by creating more tension in the lower body. It's gonna keep you more consistent. Like I said, check out that video. We just put it out, and I think it gives a great explanation of these sorts of habits you can get into to make sure your start position is good and consistent every time. Consistency goes a long ways. Next up, we've got Charlie doing some bench press here as well. Now, Charlie's from the UK. I'm gonna put this on repeat real quick. Charlie's from the UK. He's 18, 188 pounds, wants to compete in the future. So Charlie's been lifting about 2 years and powerlifting for 8 or 9 months of that. Now, this footage here is from mock meet he did. This is 110 kilo, his third attempt of the bench, and he says he's been having a really hard time progressing his bench throughout his sort of powerlifting training. He feels like his leg drive is present, but not enough, and he feels like he's losing a bit of tightness. So I'm gonna leave this one for all y'all beautiful people to check out. Let us know in the comments below what you think Charlie could do better. I'll come back next week and I will critique it, and we'll see y'all the next first Friday of the month for Form Check Friday. If you're interested in submitting, check out that thing below. Bye.